In this video, I'm going to show you how to plan, install and wire up downlights, either from above or below if you don't have access. All of this being done as a non-professional DIYer with no experience necessary. I'm going to use a real-world example of a property that I've bought and I'm renovating it around my full-time job with the intention of either selling it or letting it out. Let me show you what I did. So today we're going to be installing downlights into this ceiling. Previously here we had a single pendant light in the center, and if you're replacing something like this for downlights, say in a living room, you want to make sure you unhook that before it needs something like plastering on top. Now it's always the best idea to get plastering done before you install your downlights because it's easier for them to just skim over the surface if they need to. This is being reboarded and then plastered. Now first things first, you're going to need to work out how many downlights you do need and what downlights to get. Rule of thumb is that you need a downlight about every 1.2 meters, so 1200 mil. And personally, when I'm buying downlights, I always get fire rated. So regardless of whether it's in a living room or a bathroom, fire protected, easy to install. And personally, I always go for dimmable too, because I find downlights quite bright in the eyes, just like this light over here. So by having it dimmable, it gives like a nice warm glow instead, warm soft light glow. But modern downlights like these are much easier than they used to be. They nearly always come with fire rating now. Additionally, they come with hookup for electrics. They're all secured in this nice junction box here. So if I just pop this open, you can see that it's really easy to hook up, especially for DIY like myself. You've got your neutral, your live 1 and your live 2 and your earth. So you know the room you're putting it in, you know the downlights you need to install. Next thing is measuring how many you need. So for this, I've calculated 6. So we're gonna have 3 rows of 2 going all the way along. And I'll begin by measuring where these downlights need to go and marking them on the ceiling. Now my preferred method of this is to use a laser level. You don't need to use a laser level, but I would heavily recommend buying one because you can get 30 quid ones from Amazon. They're not super accurate, something like this DeWalt one here. But if you're leveling picture frames or even looking for spots for downlights, 30 quid is well worth the money. And it comes in handy, absolutely loads. I've had an argument with my wife before about whether picture frames were level on the wall. I got this out and it turns out she was right. So 30 quid to save an ongoing argument with a spouse could be well worth it. Right, so to start, I'm going to measure the width of the room, 3,635. And given that I'm having 2 rows of downlights, you take how many rows you're going to need and you divide the width of the room by that many plus 1. And I'll show you why in a second. But 3,635 divided by 3, because I've got 2 rows. So that gives me 1,211, which is perfect. Again, spacing in between should be around 1,200. So I know my first row of downlights will be 1,211 away from the wall. So if I take my laser level, point it so it's doing the ceiling, and I want to make sure that this laser is positioned 1,200 away from this first wall. And you can do this without a laser level, it's just a lot more measuring. So I take my tape measure, I measure the distance I want away from the wall, which in this case is 12.1, and I get the laser level to shine just on that point. And then I know directly above that will be the point I need. So I've made a mark of that just here. So then I'll do a second measurement using this same parallel wall, 12.1, and I now know directly above that, it's also 12.1 away from the wall. So I take my pen again, directly above that. So if I make sure the laser level is always running between those 2 points, I know that it's parallel to the wall all the way across the room. So I'll position the laser level now, perfect. So keeping that there, I can now work out where along this line my downlights will need to go. So I'm going to do the same thing again and measure the room, but this time the length, 4,120. I know I need 3 downlights going all the way across, 4,120 divided by 4. So in between each downlight, there should be a gap of 1030 all the way across. So this is going to be the location of our first downlight. I want to make sure that it falls in between the joists that in this house are running this way. There's no problem if a joist is in the way though, because then we'll readjust our calculations to make sure that we're hitting in between instead. There are a few ways to know where a joist is, and you can use something like this, which is a stud finder. So that should tell us when there's a wooden block and behind it, but these things aren't that accurate and I tend not to use them that often. I'll show you another way in a minute, but I'm going to just run this over because I have it. And run it all the way along and see if it picks up any joist underneath. And no, it picks up absolutely nothing. They work all right enough for the walls, but not for the ceiling. So we'll use our second method instead. I'm going to take the smallest drill bit I have and I'm going to drill a small hole exactly where I want my downlight to be. And if you have access above, you can then go above and see where that hole falls. So let me go upstairs and check that. You can see that it's come through just here. So that's probably about 40 mil away from a joist. Now that's slightly too close for my liking. So we're going to adjust our numbers to make sure that it falls more in the center. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to move this over slightly. So if you have no access from above, but you still want to know where the joist is, here's a little trick you can do. You take a piece of copper that is about this length, and you want to take your downlight with a healthy distance. So say maybe 3/4 of it. You want to bend it at that point. And then I also want to bend the other side too. So it's U-shaped. Insert that piece of copper into the small pilot hole I made, and I can spin it round and it gets stuck on the point where we know that joist is. And that tells me if we installed a downlight at this point, it would likely hit a joist. So we're going to move this over by 40. This is now 1030 away from the edge. So on the other side, it'll also be 1030 to make sure that we're even. From the edge, just got to be careful because of the coving here, 1030. So between these 2 points, and we're going for 3 downlights in total, there's only one more point that I need to make that's directly in between these 2. And a very easy way to measure on a ceiling is by having a good tape measure that can hook onto a screw. Now I can hook onto it to measure, 2020. So I know that I want my final middle downlight 110 away. So now we have our 3 marks for our downlights. We're just going to do the same for the second row. So we've got all the downlight holes marked out. We know where we need to cut, and now we need to actually make a hole to put the downlight in. We know it won't hit any joists, we're pretty confident of that. So the best way I find to do this is by using a simple hole cutting set that I got on Amazon. This has come in handy so many times before, and you can see from all the mankiness that I've left over in them. But check in the box, it looks like for this one, we need 57 millimeters. So let's get cutting. Important things to remember when you're cutting into the ceiling is that dust will fall down on you. Especially if you're below an attic, you're going to get a lot of the insulation falling onto your face. So you want to wear a mask, not breathing in plasterboard or insulation, and you want to wear glasses as well. But I can never find my mask. I always put it down somewhere. Got it, and here we go. And that's our first hole done. Just got to do 5 more now. So in all my excitement, I actually made a mistake and cut the hole in the wrong location. And I had to move it over to the correct location so it matches all the others, because otherwise it's super obvious that one downlight is in the wrong location. And it's actually a good chance to explain how to fix something like this. So don't worry too much. You can take the leftovers that you've got from the second cut, which in this case is a half moon shape because it was only partially cut, or you can make your own out of other full circle cuts that you've got. And we're going to fill it in using that plasterboard insert. So this going here will fix the hole and make sure that it looks all right overall, because then we'll just polyfill it before we decorate. So what you can do, if you don't have access above, this is also easy. You need to make sure you have a decent block of wood, something like this. You can effectively insert it from below, put it across, making sure to keep it out of the way of where the downlight's going to go. Insert your filler piece and screw that in. So I'll get my drywall screws. Get my filler piece of wood, and then I'll screw this in. That's now nice and secure. So I'm just screwing into that ready. Put this in. There we go. Got a nice strong bit of plasterboard that's filling it up, so we can just polyfiller over that, smooth over it, and then the downlight will be fine. We've got all our holes, let's wire them up. And the wiring is much easier than it sounds. Essentially, all we have to do is run a cable between every single downlight and end up where the original light-in feed was from, which in this case was a pendant light in the center of the room. So we're creating a daisy chain, starting with one downlight, hitting every single downlight on the way, and ending up in the center of the room at that existing pendant light, which I'm sitting above right here. So drawing that out, we're going to start with this downlight here and run a 1.5mm twin in earth to every single downlight, going up, back, down, across, up, back, down, across again, and ending up where the original pendant light was. And this will create a full circuit between the existing lighting circuit and our new lighting circuit for the downlights. And we're using 1.5 twin and earth because it's rated for about 14 amps. And generally, I try to go for a cable which is about double the amps that the circuit breaker will be, which in our case is 6 amps. This is pretty standard for lighting circuits. 1.5 millimeters actually means the cross section of the copper that's in the cable, and by twin and earth, it's got a live, a neutral and an earth, which is all you need for basic circuits. It's the same that'll be in your typical sockets, your lights, your car charger. You'll have a live, a neutral and an earth. But what changes is the thickness of that cross section. And as lights don't take up much amps, 1.5mm is fine. So if we're running this cable between every single downlight, what I've drawn here is the joists that are going across the room too. So we're gonna have to find a way to get this electrical cable through these joists to each of the downlights so it's all hidden. Now this is quite easy if you have access above like I do here. So I've got the flooring up and I can do that. From this position, you can use a spade bit like I've got my drill here, and you drill through your joist to create space for a cable. I've already done that here for the cable I've run through. I made a 22mm hole, which is enough for a couple of cables. But what if you don't have access above? Well, let me show you how you can do it from below. Now to feed through a joist from underneath, it's not actually too bad, but you are going to need to cut more holes in the ceiling. So at this point you should have a vague idea of where these joists are running. And say for example the joists are running this way, and I know I need to get a cable to my downlights that way. I can use my rod and the existing downlight hole I have to poke through and hit the nearest joist. And then I bring that back out, pinching the distance that it took to hit it. And that'll tell me that I'm that far away from a joist. So knowing that, if it's close enough, I can use a spade bit on the end of my drill again and drill along the side to hit that joist and drill a hole through it. But if I'm not close enough to do that, I use my hole cutting set again to cut a hole closer to the joist, probably about here, which I can then feed my spade bit through again to cut a hole through that joist. And once you've created those holes from below, you can push the cable through using electrical rods like I've got here. You can pick them up cheap on Amazon and I'll link them down below. You want something that's fairly pliant but still rigid. And you can tape on your electrical cable that you want running to this rod and then push it through the hole, feeding it all the way to the downlight you want, and then you can pull it through the downlight hole. And if you daisy chain that through every single hole that you have, you created a full circuit. And then we can fill back in that hole that's near the joist using the technique I showed earlier from the mistake I made by putting a block of wood above it and screwing in a circle which you cut out before for the downlight. So we're now at the point where we've got all the cables through the ceiling, ready to install the downlights. You can see that the cable is coming through the ceiling, looping back up and going to the next one, daisy chaining all the way along until it reaches this final one here, which is a single cable coming out, and that is the end of the daisy chain. All you then need to do is for each point of the daisy chain, install a spotlight. I've done this one here. I actually installed that one, spoke through the entire thing, and then realized my microphone wasn't on. So hopefully the microphone's on this time, and I'll talk through this one instead. Now these are probably the easiest electrics to do yourself, because you're not messing around with live cables right now. Open this. Oh, these are always horrendous to get into. I'll turn it around for you. Neutral, signified by the N, the earth symbol, live 1 and live 2. So as you can see, I've cut it in two. So one of them's my way in, one of them's my way out. Doesn't really matter which is which, because both of them are going to be plugged in anyway. So I just use my wire strippers here, and it takes away some of the sheath. You probably want this much. And the reason why I'm leaving this much specifically is because in the box, I only want the external part of the cable to be within this sheath. And this here gives me enough room to get my live all the way in. So on these newer cables, blue means neutral. This is the earth, this copper part here, and brown means live. Now I want to expose some of the copper from the end of each of these cables. So I'll do the live first. I want to expose about that much. That should be enough to get into the push fit. I'll do the same for the neutral. And for the exposed copper, you need to sleeve it in some earth sleeving. So a top tip to do this is to take a long piece of earth sleeving, find the end, bend it round so that you know how long it is, and then cut it just shy of that. And then put that over. And this is now ready to go into the push fit. So I'll take the push fit box, I'm going to push it right to the end so that it makes a solid click. So now that shouldn't be able to pull out unless I press this tab here. I'm going to do the same with the earth. There we go. And then finally with the live. There we go. And that's one side done. So you can see that the sheath is not leaving the box, which is nice and safe. And then from there we've got our live, earth and neutral all ready to go. I just need to do the other side now. Now if you don't feel comfortable doing any of this, it's absolutely not a problem. Just get an electrician to come in and do it for you. It won't take them long. But you can prepare up to this point without an electrician. All the holes cut, all the cable ready to go, then have the electrician come do this final wiring up. Neutral first, and finally live. Snap it together, making sure that I'm not catching any of the cables. push it through. Oh God, it's painful. It's like a mouse trap if you get your fingers caught on that. There we go. Okay, so now comes the harder part of wiring it up to our existing pendant light that was here before. And the new one is daisy chaining off this here. So whatever the live coming out of that before for the original light was, I need to hook that up to this one here. So this is the part where we're actually using live circuitry. So if you feel uncomfortable with this, please absolutely use an electrician. I've done this before, that's why I feel comfortable doing it. First things first, turn the power off. Off for the ground floor lights. Yeah, so this is going to the two-way light switch. This one is going to the kitchen. So I need to make sure that this sends live power to the kitchen's lighting circuit, and then this will control the light switches. So one of these needs to connect to the existing lives. I think this one here will control whether the switch is powered or not. So I'm going to connect these three together. That's one, okay, that's two. I'm just going to put this third one in. I'm hoping now the lighting should work for the kitchen. No tripping, that's good. Kitchen light is on, ground floor off. Got our power coming in, we've got our kitchen light, so the light is going to the live and that's switched individually by itself. And then we've got powering our two-way light switches with the return of the common live. So this tells me whether the switches are turned on or off. So I'm going to take my new cable, strip off the end of that. Okay, one and two. Trying to get all these neutrals. See, these chocolate blocks are the old way of doing things. Not really used as much anymore. Nothing wrong with them, just easier with these snap fit. Okay. We should now be fully hooked up. I'm going to get electric box to cover all these. There we go. All safe and waterproof. Turning on the power. Cool. Right. Kitchen lights on. Hey, look at that. We've got all 6 spotlights working perfectly. Okay, so we've done a really good job here. I'm really pleased with how these downlights have turned out. 6 was the perfect number because what you want to make sure is there's no shadow creating areas. I think for the most part, we've pretty much covered it. And I've got this light on here. Let me turn that off. All of these are dimmable as well. So I'm actually gonna install a dimmable light switch at the same time to make sure that the spotlights aren't as harsh in your eyes. But yeah, so downlights, completely accessible for DIY. The majority of the work is in the measuring, cutting and wiring up the actual downlights themselves. I would normally recommend getting an electrician in for connecting it up to the existing circuit. But hopefully you found that useful. If you want to watch more DIY videos, or even videos on the finances behind this property purchase that I've made, then subscribe or click on one of the recommended videos here.